Welcome to Grappling with the Gray, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us more clearly see both sides of complex issues and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Rabbi Yonason, and I'd like to welcome my guests. With me today is Kimberly Davis, who is an author, TEDx speaker, and founder of the Brave Leadership University, leading development programs worldwide around authentic leadership, purpose, presence, and influence. Naya Lekht is a research fellow at the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, promoting synergy between self-awareness and the world which we observe. And Mark O'Brien is founder and principal of O'Brien Communications Group, a B2B brand management and marketing communications firm, and host of The Anxious Voyage, a syndicated radio show about life's trials and triumphs. Thank you all for being with me today.
Thank you.
Wonderful to be here.
Thank you for having us.
And here is our topic. Writing last week in the Wall Street Journal, Cal State University political science professor Kevin Walston cited a national survey he conducted last year. Asked about using violence to stop a speech promoting a personally offensive position, 80% of Americans responded never acceptable. The percentage of Republicans was only marginally more than Democrats. However, generational responses tell a different story. Here's the breakdown of respondents who refuse to condone using violence to suppress speech under any circumstances. Boomers, 93%. Gen X, 86%. Millennials, 71%. Gen Z, 58%. This has nothing to do with hate speech, merely free speech. Watching clips of Charlie Kirk's campus debates, it's hard to find an example of him belittling or insulting those who challenged him. He rallied an impressive library of facts and offered coherent arguments to make his points. There were few who could hold their own with him in debate, and the college crowds often responded with applause. It's hard not to draw comparisons with Socrates, condemned to drink poison for the crime of forcing people to confront the inconsistencies of their own views. With more than 4 out of 10 young people believing that violence is an acceptable response to disagreement, how do we prevent society from disintegrating into chaos, both nationally and internationally? How do you engage others in discourse when they've already concluded that you're not only wrong, but dangerously evil? The floor is open.
I think the first response is very carefully. If I may, you piqued my curiosity, so I started digging a little bit, and I found out that something called the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, with the horribly unfortunate acronym FIRE, conducts an annual college free speech rankings survey. And in what I found, they said that Walston survey, which you just mentioned, Yonason, provided relevant context. FIRE polled more than 68,000 undergrads from 257 colleges and universities and released its results just 9 days ago. The students were asked if it's acceptable to use violence to stop a campus speech. Responses are categorized as always acceptable, sometimes acceptable, rarely acceptable, or never acceptable. 34% of students said some level of violence is acceptable to stop a speech. 38% of male students versus 29% of female students say violence is at least rarely acceptable. Only 58% of Gen Z, ages 18 to 26, said violence is never acceptable, compared to about 80% of all Americans in broader national polls. 54% of students said it's acceptable to block others from attending a speech, and 68% supported shouting down speakers to prevent them from being heard.
But see, those results are not surprising to me because, and this I'm going to tap into my knowledge of the history of anti-Jewish movements. And the history of anti-Jewish movements is the history of deployment of libels. Libels are not just lies. Lies are, what did you have for breakfast? You didn't have a banana, but I'm going to say you had a banana. That doesn't do much. That doesn't harm, doesn't smear you. But libels, the deployment of libels is there to demonize. And interestingly enough, what the tragedy, the evil that happened to Charlie Kirk is no different than the story of Jew hatred in many ways, which is the story of what do you do to what happens when you demonize a people or an individual to such a degree where you are ready and willing, you are really ready and willing to exterminate them. And you actually think it's a virtuous thing. And that, again, I'm going to tap into my knowledge of Jew hatred. Jew hatred, whether we're talking about anti-Semitism, anti-Judaism, or today's form, which is anti-Zionism, what makes it very difficult to combat is that it is cloaked in virtuous language. It's a virtuous hatred. And the people who wake up in the morning, who want to clean the world, cleanse, purge the world of people like Charlie Kirk, think they're doing good things. And so the results that you just cited do not surprise me. Are they upsetting? Are they disturbing? But they're not surprising because I've been in the field of education for now 15 years. I started as an undergrad in the early 2000s, and I saw the demonization campaign mount. And so what ended up happening on my college campus and on college campuses today is that speakers that you don't like get shut down like this immediately. And that's exactly what happened with Charlie Kirk. He was shut down violently. And so, listen, I have some students who say, well, you know, what happened was really terrible. But the fact that there is even a but is so alarming. And at the same time, as I'm, you know, articulating that position, what I'm also saying is I'm not surprised because when you demonize and deploy libels and you demonize and you make it a cyclical structural hate towards a person, naturally you believe that you are taking a virtuous, you are on the right side of this war. Yeah, so these results, I'll tell you another study that was done years ago, I think by the Heritage Foundation, that found that 83% of college students self-censor themselves. So now the shutting down is not you don't even have to be shut down by somebody else. You shut yourself down.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the point you're making. It's you know, I'm kind of surprised myself that until just now when you were speaking, I never really thought about the actual meaning of the word demonize, to turn someone into a demon, to brand them as devilish. And that is exactly what I think so much of the danger is. I mean, certainly in my when I teach Holocaust studies, you know, the Nazi philosophy was that they were doing the world a service by purging these elements from human society. And and it may not have gotten that extreme among the mainstream, but I agree with you, Naya. I think we are definitely heading more and more in that direction. And you know, it's been said that the Jewish people are the canary in the coal mine. That what the first signs of these types of movements are focused on Jews, but it's not going to stop there. And that means it's everybody's problem. It's not just a Jewish problem. Mark, Kimberly, what do you think?
Well, I think, I mean, so much of this speaks to how ill-equipped we are to navigate our own emotions and that we just don't have very good coping mechanisms. And I think that is a big part of it. I mean, when emotions get high, if we don't have the skills to navigate them, and we find ourselves in echo chambers that are filled with people who only speak about a topic from one perspective, and we are working ourselves up collectively in those echo chambers into a frenzy of we need to do something. To your point, Naya, that it's got to be, it's a virtuous thing to do the right thing. And we can define, every single group defines right thing based on their own beliefs and their own echo chamber. So we find that on every single side of every single argument. I think what it speaks to is that human beings, because things are so uncertain right now, that tribalism is the one thing that we're all glomming onto because we feel less alone and less afraid when we're in a bigger group, and that tribalism is causing division and otherizing, and our the fact that we're so ill-equipped to deal with these heightened emotions is what leads us to behaviors that are devastating.
And to your point, Naya, in the early 90s, I believe, a gentleman, an anthropologist named Sam Keen, wrote a book called Faces of the Enemy. And he described the process that you just described. And it's a process first of, what was the term you just used, Kimberly? Otherness or
Otherizing,
otherizing. Thank
and
you.
she was talking about demonizing, and I think they're different flavors of the same thing.
Well, in
Mhm.
Sam Keen's book, he says the first thing that we do is objectify, which in my mind is otherizing.
Mhm.
The people that we objectify are other than human. And then once we've objectified them, it's not a big leap to demonize them.
Right.
And that's
Right.
that's the way it works. And he takes this back to tribal days, actually. It's an ancient practice.
Mhm.
I'd get up and look. I think I have the book back there, or maybe I lent it to somebody. I don't remember.
Right. But I guess my question or I push back against what you're saying is I think that by virtue of being human, we put ourselves in tribes and it's natural to other one another. That to
Mhm.
me, that's see, one of the things that I always disliked about Holocaust education was that they told me as a child that the reason the Holocaust happened is because Jews were othered. And I always found that to be a bit shallow and insufficient
Mhm.
because we as human beings, we have stereotypes. We other
Yeah.
each other
Yeah.
um, within our own, little communities. Then you grow. But the question is where when it becomes dangerous. That's when when does it cross kind of that Rubicon
But
where it
I think
becomes
it's a spectrum, right? So I think it starts with otherizing, which compounds with fear and anger becomes demonizing. But I don't think it starts as demonizing. I think it's fear and the otherizing when they meet, it creates an explosive combination that turns anger into hatred, and
Mhm.
that becomes dangerous.
Naya, could you say more about what you found to be shallow and insufficient? I actually wrote that down. It caught me. No, I did.
I, yeah, I think that I mean I've been studying, as I said in my introductory remarks, I've been studying Jew hatred for a very long time because I find it to be one of a very complex form of hatred that's very unique because it evolves and mutates and has the capability of cloaking itself in language that is most appealing to its time and to what Yonason, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, said. When the Nazis and those their collaborators were purging literally, the world of Jews, they thought that they were doing the right thing. They were virtuous. And so I guess what I felt was missing in Holocaust education is it's not just a story of othering, period. It's a story of it's really a story of demonization. It's a story of when the othering, see, we know now, we look back and we have the 2020 vision, the hindsight, but when we're living in today's world, we sometimes don't understand it to such a degree. It's cloaked in such virtuous language. It's coded for us that we fall for it because we think it's a virtuous thing. And so, like, for instance, what do people care mostly today about? It's human rights, it's justice. And so today the Jew violates that, right? According to the villainry of the Jew is found in casting of the Jew in the fact that Jew violates those tenets of human rights. To my students, the very same students who hate hate, they hate hate, they want to fight against hate, they will never understand that when you cast, let's say, Zionism or Israel as a violator of human rights, they don't understand that is pathway towards purging the world of the Jew vis-a-vis Israel, because to them it looks virtuous. That's, I guess, what was missing for me when people said that the Holocaust was about the dangers of othering. I felt it wasn't enough. It wasn't just a story of othering. It was a story of, why do good people wake up, unless you're a psychopath? Good people don't wake up ready and willing to exterminate, right? The students who I teach, most of them, I mean, one student this week, he admitted to me he's a pacifist. He hates all wars, yet he's part of the Free Palestine movement and doesn't understand that that movement is a movement that's coded in virtuous words and virtuous language to other, if you want to say other, but to really demonize. It's more than just othering. Because I can other another group of people, but that doesn't mean that I want to go now and exterminate them. Right? I'm all for confronting the reality. I'm an American. I'm a Jewish person. Uh, People who are different, they're other to me, and that's fine. They're other to me. The question is, when does that othering become dangerous? That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that when they presented that the Holocaust is a story of othering, I found it to be, it didn't go far enough for me to explain how do good people do bad things, because I think I other others, if you will, but that doesn't mean I'm ready to go and, God forbid, and do terrible things. It's a very long answer, but
No, I think you're absolutely right. And Sigmund Freud and many others, Moses Mendelssohn, um, they believe the same thing. They said the source of anti-Semitism is that Jews stand out, they don't blend in, they don't integrate into society, and if we could just stop drawing attention to ourselves by being different, that would eliminate anti-Semitism. Of course, it never worked. The German Jews were one of the most assimilated groups in any European society.
that's another
Following
good point.
Stephen Pinsker, who wrote a book called Auto-Emancipation, where he said, the problem with the Jews is we're a nation without a country. All we need is a country, and then we will be accepted by the rest of the world as equals, and that will end anti-Semitism. Well, we see how well that's worked. Um, I want to resist something because I look, I teach this stuff and I'm passionate about it, like you are, and I'd like to broaden our discussion beyond anti-Semitism, and because I think that's a unique phenomenon. But I think it also relates to what you were saying about the othering, Kimberly. I think that the real component today that I see, and I'm not the only one who said this, is that the narrative is about oppressor versus oppressed. And because Israel is seen as a successful Western country, because the United States is a successful Western country, we are successful. That makes us oppressors. And anyone who is not in that category is the oppressed. And it goes back to your point, Naya, that the people who are passionate against America, Americanism, against Israel, against Western culture and values, that's their moral compass in their minds. We are the defenders of the oppressed. We are fighting for justice and equality in the world. And then the irony is now any means justify working towards those ends. And when it gets extreme, you get Charlie Kirk.
I feel like I'm seeing a bunch of things connect here. And at the very beginning of this conversation, I wrote down intolerance and ignorance because to me that's clearly a dangerous and volatile conversation. While you were talking, Naya, I was also thinking that one of the things, and when you were talking about Israel and the Jews and extermination, one of the things that's gone wrong is that the exterminators have been misidentified. And then I connected that to what you said about the Heritage Foundation study about students self-censoring. So they're doing that, I think, because they're afraid. If they recognize the truth, they're afraid to say it or support it or defend it. And it becomes this sort of vicious circle. And the last thing that I wrote down was envy, because when ignorance and intolerance get combined with the envy of, I'm going to say Western cultures, Yonason, to pick up on your term, that appear to be doing better, that's when it gets really dangerous. And I think the people who, I'm going to say, choose to be envious, I think they're the ones who consider themselves oppressed.
But I think, guys, I really think that you can look at every single side of all of it, and we can say we know truth and they have envy, or we are right and they are wrong. I mean, and I'm not just saying what's happening in Israel and Palestine. I'm saying what's happening with Charlie Kirk,
Yeah.
and I'm saying what's happening all over the world in every single situation. We are going to, whoever you are, you're going to think the other side, whatever the other side is they are ignorant, that it must be envy. It must, I think that that is just a human thing to do. And and the truth is, it's hard to crawl into the skin of somebody else and understand their experience. Um, but I think we need to stop looking through our own lenses all the time and do a better job and go, well, what is the human experience here? Not the right experience, the wrong experience, this religion, that faith, this part of the country, that part of the country, but what's the human experience? Because I feel like it's getting lost. And I actually think a lot of the conversation I've heard today feels like we're the virtuous ones. Well, but other people think they're the virtuous ones. So who's right? What's truth? I think truth
No,
is
but
going to
that's what
be,
I'm saying. But that's what I'm saying. It's very dangerous to think of in those ways about I'm on the side of virtue. It's very
but don't
dangerous.
you think we're doing the exact same thing? Aren't you saying that you're on the side of virtue?
No, I'm just describing how people who demonize think that they are on the side of virtue. That's
But
all.
I
I'm
think we're
saying,
doing the same thing. And if we don't hold up the mirror to ourselves and go, how are we doing the exact same thing, that we will never be able to to create change. We will always be in our different camps pointing fingers, and it will become this horrible thing that we're seeing. I mean, where huge atrocities on every side are happening, like all over the world.
But then I think you're raising, Kimberly, saying this sort of, I mean, it gets into a really messy way of trying to work through, because on the one hand, I want to understand what's going through the mind of the guy who shot Charlie Kirk. What's going through the minds of people who commit these kinds of atrocities? I want to understand what motivates a person to do that. But I also feel morally bound to condemn what they're doing.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely. And I'm not
So,
saying that
right.
it's one or the other. I think that it's more complicated than this or that. There are two truths that can be true at the same time. That was horrific, absolutely horrific. And what, I mean, in the news this morning, they were saying that the kid sent his roommate a text saying I couldn't handle the hate anymore. I couldn't handle the hate anymore. To me, it's like, well, okay, this kid clearly did not have coping mechanisms for navigating his own emotions. He didn't feel like he had the tools to do something else, to bring dialogue to Charlie Kirk, to write something, to do something that was constructive. I think a lot of this generation, if you look at what they've been through, Gen Z particularly, I mean, They were born when the housing crisis happened. Half the world lost their jobs, and then there's COVID, and then there's all the wars, and then there's climate change, and I mean it is what. So they don't have a lot of hope that things are going to be different. So it's very this is they just don't know how to deal with it. They're flooded with emotion without the tools to navigate this world that we've put them in. I'm
Well, I think
sorry.
you're,
Like,
no,
Yonason, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were going to say something.
I was
no, I
just going to
don't need to
say
say
that
anything.
the last point you made, Kimberly, that, they don't have the tools. I think that actually is the biggest problem.
Yes.
They don't have the tools because of their devices. They don't have the tools because of COVID. They don't have the tools because of parents who have raised them without discipline. In terms of what they've dealt with, I grew up, and Mark, you probably remember this, with the specter of nuclear
Mm.
nuclear holocaust. I mean, we had these air raid drills, which always seemed ludicrous to me. Um, Somehow going to the bottom of the parking structure is going to protect me from a nuclear bomb. But yeah, I think every generation has its crises and its instabilities. But I think that my generation, I'm at the end of the baby boomers, we were raised with the World War II generation, where people had very clear values still. It was I wasn't really affected by the hippie movement. Um, and there was a sense of community, and there was a sense of family, and they give people structure in their lives. And I think their lives now are so unstructured
Well,
that
and everybody is with because of social media, the cacophony of the echo chambers it blurs out everything else. So you can think that yours is the only perspective out there.
go ahead,
Um,
Mark.
yeah, Kimberly, I want to share this with you because, um, first of all, I just absolutely appreciate um, how passionate you are in what you were saying, and to give you an indication of my understanding of what you're saying. For a while, I was involved with a literacy volunteers group, and most of the students who were tutored by our literacy volunteers were illegal aliens. Now, if you were to ask me, generally speaking, am I for open borders, et cetera, I would say no. I wouldn't even think twice. No, I'm not. People should come into the country lawfully. However, for a while, I was the executive director of that organization. And a woman in another community service organization in the same town came and told me that she wanted to get some of the students who were in our program into the media. And the way I read that was, oh, they're going to be exposed. I can't do that. And that helped me understand that every stereotype breaks down at the level of the individual.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I actually do understand what you were saying about our perceiving ourselves, regardless of our orientations, to be virtuous. I get that. Thank you. I wouldn't have
Thanks for
thought of it
hearing
otherwise.
me and my
Yeah,
intent behind it.
I wouldn't have thought of that if you hadn't shared that. Thank you.
I think we have to have these kinds of conversations, particularly with people that we don't agree with completely, um, because that is how we broaden our perspective. And that's how we challenge ourselves to reevaluate our own points of view and be able to articulate our own positions and arguments, um, and see how they sound to people who are not already on board. One of the most powerful articles I remember reading after October 7th was written by Sam Harris, who is somebody that I'm not a fan of at all. But he made a very articulate case for the moral equivalence that was being practiced. And he very objectively and systematically went through the two sides and highlighted the differences between them in a way that was almost irrefutable for anyone who is, dealing with facts and logic. Um, Going back to our initial question about, shouting down or using violence to stop speech. I mean, I remember I don't think it was Charlie Kirk, it was somebody else who was speaking to an antagonistic group, and people put their hands over their ears and started chanting, "Walk away, walk away, walk away."
It's terrible.
How do you get through?
Yeah, but I understand it, Yonason, because I think about my physiological response just in this conversation, right? My physiological response was my emotions were rising. I wanted to be heard. I didn't feel like I had the language I wanted to use to influence and be heard the way I wanted to be heard. And I felt like I wanted to just go, I don't know what to do. And I get it. I get it. And I do this for professionally. So you look at how ill-equipped the rest of our world is to navigate these difficult, heightened conversations and really listen to one another and see one another human to human without all of the I am American, I am Christian, I am Jewish, I am from here, I am from here, I am woman, I am alien, I am, like without all the labels, but just human to human. We are ill-equipped to do that. We cannot seem to do that any longer. And I think that is the problem. And
I'm,
maybe we've never been able to do that. But I don't think until we can, we're going to be able to navigate this in a way that doesn't cause tremendous pain for one group or another.
But
I'm
you can't
connected.
do that because you care about your family, right? More than you
Yeah.
would care about my family. And that's normal.
Well,
I'm
yes,
not going to
and
ask
I
you to
don't know
feel
that
this.
that has to be the case. I mean, yes, I absolutely care about my family,
More than
but
you would
I
about my
think we
family. And
need
that's a
to
normal
start
thing.
to understand what it feels like from the other person's perspective. And until we can get really curious about that, and not just from an intellectual standpoint, but want to understand it, feel like it's vital to understand the other experience, I don't think we're going to be able to have a conversation that can actually create change.
I,
Because we
I'm
only want to talk to
No,
convince somebody.
no, no, we want to arrive at truth. We want to arrive at some sort of truth. But if there is no truth and it's just your truth, my truth, his truth, I don't know what they're to arrive at then.
But
And
is there a truth? I think that's subjective in many ways. I do think it's subjective. I mean, there's facts and then there's truth.
Well,
But
that's where we start, though. We start with the facts, we start with the logic, and then we can get to a place where if there's room for different perspectives, different experience,
sure,
then that's the time for that. But if we don't start with the bedrock of what is reality, then there really is no place to go. And I think that's where much of our culture has gone
yeah.
wrong in recent years.
I'm
Alan, just I wanted to
yeah, go ahead.
Alan
Go ahead.
Bloom. I think he was in the late '80s. He wrote The Closing of the American
I
Mind,
know.
Yeah.
and something that he observed. He did a survey on with his students, and he observed this in that his students were resistant to calling things or people evil. He said his students didn't want to label leaders, countries evil. Rather, he said they were more comfortable saying actions are evil. So behavior is evil,
Hmm.
but people are not evil. And I find that very interesting uh, and germane to this conversation of this kind of resistance to say that, okay, something is actually evil. I mean, I think that we need to be able to say, I think that what happened, I think that it's a big tragedy. I think this person was definitely hurting, who hurt, right? Who killed Charlie Kirk. He was a hurting individual. He was not mentally stable. That's for sure. But that action is evil. Is
But I
look at me. I
also
just said
believe
the
that
action is evil.
I believe that he believed. Now, I don't agree. I think what he did was horrific, but I believe that he believed that Charlie Kirk was evil. From his lived
Right, but
experience, I believe that he believed that.
totally. And the Nazis believed that the Jews needed to be purged. And I don't want to try to understand the Nazis.
I'm connected to a guy on Facebook. I went to school with this guy, and I'm talking about elementary school through high school. I haven't seen him since high school. We connected on Facebook. We are diametrically opposed politically. And I had written a piece about Charlie Kirk's assassination. And so this guy, whose name is John, um, I shared it with him, and his first response was, "Yeah, but." And I said, "Well, don't you think we could find a middle ground?" And he wrote a response to me, and his first two words were, "I agree," followed by "but." And he said something he didn't like about Charlie Kirk's debating style, which he called "prove me wrong." And he was also talking about the what he took to be inappropriate about people losing their jobs for things they had said. So I wrote back to him and I said, "John, I understand that we're at opposite ends of this thing, but please understand the second word in your response to me was agree. If we take the personalities out of it, I agree with you that prove me wrong is not a debating style. And I also agree with you that causing people to lose their jobs for things they say is inappropriate. Why can't, if we could do that once, why can't we do that again? And why doesn't that constitute some beginning toward working toward a middle?" And I thanked him for his respect. Nothing. He didn't respond at all.
Because people cannot handle the way they feel, Mark. I think that's what's real. Is that is he, I'm guessing he probably didn't like the way he felt, not just about this topic, not just about you, but also about himself.
Could
And
be.
and when we don't know what to do with our feelings, we do really destructive things.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that largely why we're here? Because in recent years, we have elevated feelings above intellect. I mean, we've always been victims of our feelings to some extent. Right? But I think that there was a cultural norm where people placed reality, objective reality, right, before personal feelings. And now what do they call this era? The post-truth era? I mean, we call it that in many cases unashamedly.
Mhm.
Well, and I think when I hear people say we're all entitled to our own truth, to me, that's an indication of the extent to which we need to be talking to each other. Because I
Well,
think,
I think there's a real problem though, because we have commercialized demonizing. People are making
Oh,
money off the backs of the more hate you spread, the more clicks you get, the more money there is. And so when you commercialize
sure.
demonizing, the incentives are to demonize. And that is a problem. That is a real problem.
It's true.
wow,
You're right.
that's a very sobering point.
Yeah, and then they actually get to the heart of the problem. Because the way the algorithms are designed to push us towards more and more salacious content, the way the media is now so tribalized.
Mhm.
We frequently talk about how, some of us are old enough to remember when there were three network news stations, and they had to be somewhat balanced
Mhm.
just as a business decision. They couldn't afford to alienate a
Right.
large swath of the viewership. And so they could not be outwardly partisan. They had to have some basis in reality, and they had to take accountability when they went off the reservation. And I understand that's now politically incorrect to say that, but the now we're at this point where it's easy not to care about reality.
You know what though, Yonason, I actually think it's not that it, I think people are so flooded, they care so much that it is so uncomfortable to care that it's easier to check out because caring hurts.
Mm.
But that's not viable.
But I think it's what's real.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's what's real.
Well,
Caring
then
hurts.
that goes back to the technology. I mean, our whole culture is now focused on inflaming our emotions
Yeah.
because that's what gets clicks. That's what keeps eyes glued to the screen. That's what gets audience share and readership. And
Bearing in mind that I still somehow manage to believe that everything is cyclical, how do we break out of that caring hurts? I mean, if caring, and I'm not disagreeing with you, by the way.
Well, I know how I navigate it, and I don't know how anybody else navigates, but I really look at how do I take full personal responsibility? How do I make sure I'm paying attention to not one talk track, but many talk tracks? And I focus on my own realm of control, which for me is how do I make a difference one person at a time and really try to understand the person at a time. But I don't know how to scale that, Mark. I don't know how to scale that
That's
because
it,
I think that's
scaling.
the problem is that it we're not all taking personal responsibility. We're not all taking a real look at what's true for us and where might we, I mean, and I think this is the hard thing is to look in the mirror and go, okay, where have I decided about situations and people and places and events? Where have I made a decision about it? And I'm spending all of my life energy proving myself right, instead of how do I look at how I look at the world and explore here's my lived experience and what I'm reading and but what else am I missing? Because I think we're all missing a big piece of the conversation, which is what other people experience and what their feelings are and what they need and what their pain is.
well, and let's sort of leave it with that as a big question mark um, at the end. For those of you who are watching, if you'd like to have access to the backstage conversation that continues after this, please go to my Substack, become a premium member. You can have access to that. But for now, I think Kimberly, you've done a wonderful job modeling how you can get extremely passionate, uh, be pushed to the edge of your comfort zone, and yet still hang in there.
Right, I agree.
You didn't,
Jonathan, you give me a chance to do this so often.
you didn't, you
Like,
didn't,
oh
you didn't
gosh.
blow up the show. You didn't walk out on us.
Yeah.
You didn't start sending electronic biofeedback. Anyway, and uh, and Naya, I think you did a wonderful job staying cool.
Yeah.
And I know these are topics you're very passionate about.
Yeah,
Uh,
I
you know,
I try to, in my classes that I teach, I really believe in the Socratic method, which is I always tell my students that I don't want to just hear you answer. I want you to learn to question, form your own questions, learn to be the question askers. But more than that, push back against me and challenge me and don't believe everything I say. Go verify. I think that's really important. Um, I think there's also like this infantilization of young adults who are high school, college students that they're not,
Amen.
I really do think so. And again,
Mhm.
I'm going to give tribute to Charlie Kirk here. Listen, before he passed, before he was murdered, I knew of him, of course, but I didn't really listen to him at all that much. From time to time, people would send me clips. And most recently, I saw him engage with some very angry college students who kind of shouted at him, like, you have no right being here. You have the upper hand. You're older than us. We're just college students getting our degrees. And this is just really unfair. It's a power imbalance. And they try to shut him down. And, very calmly, he said, well, actually, I never went to college. Um, So you actually may have the upper hand. And he's like, I'm actually talking to you because you can vote. You're voters. And he said, the worst thing is I don't want to treat you like kids. You're adults. I'm giving you the utmost respect by challenging you. That's the I'm giving my students the utmost respect when I challenge them. I don't want to keep them comfortable. I think that sometime around the year 2010, 15, we talked about what safe spaces. I don't want safe spaces in the classroom. I want spaces where people are challenged and they may feel emotionally upset and angry, but we have to learn to control that. And I model that too, because I can get really angry too, because my students, oh boy, do they challenge me. They really, really do. And inside is like brewing this storm inside me, but I can't, it's the wrong thing to do. You have to model a modicum of dignity and discipline.
Yeah, and believe me, I
Naya, when I get a
you're
little younger, I would sincerely like you to be my teacher.
Okay.
but yeah, and you're spot on, Naya, because I retired from teaching in 2016, and last year I let myself get dragged back into a part-time, and the difference between students then and students now is I don't even. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
latest.
I've had,
It's from one universe to another, and it's to they don't want to be challenged. They don't want
they
to
don't.
work. They want to think.
I told a student the other day who came up to me and said, I think it's going to be hard for me to stay in your class because he's going to stay because you and I may differ. This is, at this evening school that I teach, but anyway, over Zoom. And I said, I just want to ask you I have one request. Can you keep an open mind? And I'm going to keep an open mind. Let's do like together. We're going to keep an open mind. That's all I'm asking. You can be so angry. I said, I validate your anger. Be angry. Just keep an open mind. Let's see.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's where we start.
Yeah.
Keeping an open mind. That's right.
And and reaching out to people with that message. I'll respect you. You respect me, and let's see where maybe we can meet, or at least how we can talk to each other civilly and thoughtfully and master our emotions rather than letting them master us. Thank you for a passionate and thoughtful discussion.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being
Yeah.
on this. Very interesting. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Yonason.
Kimberly Davis, Naya Lekht, Mark O'Brien, a pleasure. And for those of you who are watching or listening, if you have a topic you'd like us to take up, please go to my website, ethicsninja.com. Use the contact information. Submit your idea. If it's compelling, we'll take it up on a future episode. And until then, as always, we encourage you to continue grappling with